Okay, so afternoon, everybody. This chilly, well, inside chilly Cape Town afternoon. I was prepping for this, and I just kept going and going and going. So I'm gonna cut it at 30 minutes, but I hope I managed to um, shape it in such a way that we cover the things that I said we were going to cover. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump straight into this presentation. So what we're going to cover today is want to get a little bit of mastery on managing graphics and animations when it comes to using Keynote. Many of the things that I'm going to show you today, with the exception of the actual animations themselves, are replicable across numbers and across pages. So the skills that you learn here can be used in numbers and pages as well. So please bear that in mind. I'm going to start off very basically. A lot of people don't know how to use the computer to make it work for them, to make it easy to lay things out. So one of the first things that you should use the computer to do is to get your objects nicely laid out on the screen so you don't have to eyeball it. You see so many presentations where people use their eyeballs to manage things, and it doesn't work very well. So I'm going to take a shape and I'm going to insert a circle, just a simple circle over here. Now, if I want a row of circles across here, I can copy and paste them, or I can use the duplicate selection command. I'm going to use keyboard commands for simplicity. So I'm going to hit Command D. You can see I now have 2 of these objects here. So let's say I want 10 of these objects. I'm going to hit Command D another 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I now have a bunch of objects on my screen, but they're not particularly nicely laid out. So what if I want to distribute these into a nice little line over here? Well, one of the ways I could do it, you can see as I move these around here, I get these little lines that tell me whether these are intersecting vertically, horizontally, and so on. So I could start to move these guys out and say, well, let me start with my first one, and I want you to get you in line. Okay, I'm happy with this. Now, watch what happens when I take the second one and line it up. Can you see how when the third object is the same distance from the second object as the second object is the first, I get these little arrows that tell me I'm in line and the same distance. So this is one way of doing it, but it's fairly lengthy and fairly laborious. The easiest way to distribute some objects across a line is I put the first object where I want it to be. I put the last object and put that where I want to be. Then I select all of the objects. Just get there. Okay, they're over there. Now, if I go to my Arrange menu, I have these 2 fantastic little tools, Align and Distribute. So I want to align these so that the bottoms are all aligned. So I go Align, Bottom, bang, and they're all on a line. And now I want to distribute them horizontally. Now they're distributed horizontally, they're in a perfect place. I can group these now, I can duplicate them, I can do whatever I want to do with them. But I really have had to do minimal amount of work to make sure that everything is lined up perfectly. Okay, does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. If I decide that I wanted to tuck them in slightly closer, I can just say, okay, let's just bring that one in a little bit more, select all the objects, and I can say, okay, distribute them horizontally again, boom, and again, they've all shuffled appropriately. And once again, if I can say, whoops, just unselect them. So let's take this one and this one. If I want to align them by the lefts and do them vertically, again, I select them all. I can say, okay, align by the left and distribute vertically. Exactly the same thing applies. So get the computer to work for you. Don't do the work yourself. So that's the first part of aligning and distribution. Now, Keynote has some very powerful object tools that you can manage with. Now, let's say, for example, I want to get a semicircle. If I go to my shapes, there are no semicircles in these shapes. There's quite a few different objects, but there's no semicircles. So one of the things that I can do is I can combine 2 objects into more complex shapes. We've always been able to do that with grouping. So I want to take this and I want to cut this circle into a semicircle, but they're different sizes. So if I want to make sure that this square is exactly the same size as the circle, I select the circle And in my formatting toolbar over here, I can see that the size of this is 318. It's a perfect circle. It's 318 by 318 pixels. So I'm going to select the square, and I want to make it 318 as well. If I don't constrain the proportions and type 318, it will just resize horizontally because I've adjusted the width. But if I constrain my proportions and make it 318, now it's a perfect square. So what can I do with this? I'm going to take this and I'm going to move this. In fact, let me just change the color so it's a little bit easier to see. I'm going to move this so that my circle is almost exactly, my square is almost exactly overlapping the circle. Now, if I select the first object, which is already highlighted, I hold my shift key down and select the second object and go to my arrange palette under here. You can see down at the bottom, I can unite them, I can intersect them, I can subtract or exclude. So if I click subtract, the first object cuts away everything that's behind it and disappears, and I now have a semicircular object which I can use to do work with. If I'm going to use a lot of semicircles, I can right click on it and I can save it to my shapes. So now when I go to my shapes, this is called a semicircle. I now have a shape that I can come back. I don't have to do this every time I want to reshape or create new shapes. And I can do this, and I can make this into a quarter circle. I can use all my tools at my disposal to make any shape that I want to. Now, let's say I want to do the same thing with this guy over here. I want to just cut him off at the waist. I just want to use the waist. Now, I'm going to do the same thing, but I guess one of the ways we used to do this in the past was we used to take the object, and you may not know how to do this. So I've got a little object that's in front of my man over here. One thing I could do is I could go to the style palette, use my color picker, and then use the little eyedropper. I could pick up the color that's in the background and fill it with a background. Now, if I was to group these two objects together, to all intents and purposes, I've got the man cut the way I want to. The problem is, though, is that the shape is really big. And if I want to align it vertically or horizontally, the center of the alignment is over here, not in the middle of the guy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that. And now I'm going to select the square. I'm going to select the guy at the back. I'm going to subtract. And now that object will align with the middle of whatever I want it to, because the object is now a new shape and a new size. So this is quite a useful little tool to utilize if you want to manage shapes inside or manage your graphics. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that shapes are actually text placeholders. So if I create a shape and I double click inside it, it becomes a placeholder for text. And it automatically reshapes and resizes to fill that shape. And obviously, the smaller the text, the better it will fill the object. So if you've got tiny text over here, and if I reshape that text, it'll fill it. So if you want to put text in a box, text in a square, text in a star, and then you can change the color of the text behind it, of the object behind it. So if I select this object and I change this to the same color or to give it no color fill, you'll see I now have some text, which will always be the shape of the object that contains it. And I can place this anywhere I want to in on my slide. Now, if you subdivide an object, it's still a placeholder. And if I double click on this, you'll see my text. You'll see that it works exactly the same. So this is a really nice way of doing things. This is me. So using shapes as placeholders for text is very, very, very useful. Okay, what else can we do? So I've got an object over here, this fern, and I want to have this fern represent a mood, a feeling. So one of the things that we can do is we can use shapes to mask graphics. So I'm going to go to the Finder, and I'm going to go to my presentation, and I'm going to bring in an image. I've got an image of a forest, Newlands Forest, for those of you who don't know it. And now I've got my fern, I've got my forest. I'm going to bring the fern to the front. And over here, you see we have our arrangement. We can send things to the back, to the front, forward or backwards. I've also customized my toolbar because I like to arrange things quite a lot. So I've put them in my toolbar. So I'm going to bring the fern to the front, and I'm going to place the fern over my object. So the fern selected, it's got its handles. I'm going to hold the shift key down and choose the image behind it. And one of the things here we can do is I can go to format my image and I can mask it with the selection. If I choose that, you can now see that my fern contains the image and it masks the image behind. So I can resize it, I can duplicate it, and now I can really have a lot of fun with my presentation. My presentation is starting to look like my presentation and not the dummy boilerplate stuff that I get with all of my presentations. Okay, 10 minutes in and we're, gosh, slide number 3. Okay, so one of the new features, and if you don't have this functionality built into your version of Keynote, just make sure you update to the latest version. One of the things that you can do, which I've been waiting for years and years and years, is the ability to fill text with images as well. So, you know, if I select my text over here, we've got the ability to change the color, just like you'd expect. But you can also do gradient fills, change the direction of the gradient. But a new feature that they've added is an image fill. So if I choose image fill, it's already selected the image that I had before, but I can go in here and can choose any other picture that I happen to have on my hard drive. And you can see now I have a forest. The same image that we used before is now on inset into my text. Now the beauty of this is this is editable text. So if I change the text to peaceful and then resize it, a little bit bigger. Okay, change the point size to make it say 700 to fit, maybe 600. You get the picture. I don't need to be particularly pedantic about this. But now that it's filled with my image, I can treat it as normal text, and instead of a color, I've got myself a really lovely graphic. And I can use this to reinforce my story, like War and Peace, for example. So this is a very, very fast run through about graphics, how you can manage graphics, how you can intersect them, how you can fill them, and how you can use graphics inside your text as well. So I'm going to cut that there. Guys, if you really want to know more, you know, I did prep for this, and my goodness, I just kept going and going and going, and I could just stay working on graphics for hours, but I know people want to see about animation and builds, so I'm going to move on to animations. So there's 3 primary types of animations that you can do inside Keynote. They're transitions, they're builds, and there's actions. And basically a transition is what happens when you move from slide to slide to slide. A build is what happens on the slide. So if you're revealing bullet points, if you're animating an object, you're revealing objects one by one by one, you're having them remove. And then actions are moving objects around your particular slide. So let's start off with transitions, because that's the most fundamental thing. So over here, I've got 3 slides, and I wanted to make it look fairly interesting. I've got 3 slides about the same website. I was giving a talk about learning online and how there's so much information on YouTube. And I wanted to go through the 3 primary, at the time, the 3 primary video editing sites, picture sites, and Facebook, social media sites. And I wanted to move from site to site, but I wanted it to look like it was on the same slide. So if I select the slide and I come up here to animate, there are a variety of effects that I can have when I go from slide to slide. So I can select these. You can see one of them is appear and move. The other is flip, spin, and scale. The other one affects the objects inside the slide, and the other one is a text effect. Now I don't have to actually physically select them to preview them. If I choose the word preview next to each one, well, let's just say here, let's go move in. This is what will happen when the next slide comes in. Push, reveal. We've got switch. So there's some really nice cinematographic effects over here. But the one that I chose was object flip. So I made the size of the Safari window exactly the same size, and I just replaced the content. Now when I go from slide to slide, it just flips. So it looks like it's exactly the same window, but the content changes. So if I go into playback mode here, when I click to advance to my next slide, it just rotates around. It just rotates around. So even though I'm on 3 separate slides, I'm using the transition effect to show movement, to show that I'm going from topic to topic to topic. And the fact that each slide, you can see how old this is because it's got the old buttons over here up at the top. So that's the most simplistic way of moving and creating a story between your slides. You can overuse transitions. I like to think that if you're using a transition, it has to have a justification. It has to have a meaning. But I leave that up to you. I have seen presentations where I felt like I've been on a roller coaster and wished I hadn't, eaten too much popcorn. The next transition is an unusual one because this also affects the objects on the slide, and this is called magic move. A magic move is very useful because it's a bit like keyframe animation. If I want to have objects move around the screen, I'll start with this very simple one. Basically, you have 2 slides. I'm going to select the slide on the left and I'm going to duplicate it. And what I do on the second slide is I move the objects around. So I'm going to resize this guy. I'm going to move this up to here. I'm going to move this down to here, and I'm going to make this a bit smaller. I'm going to go back to the previous slide, and I'm going to my transitions. It's already set to magic move. Let's just change it. Magic move. And now I get a preview of what's going to happen. So let's have a look and see in the real time what happens. I play it. Okay, that didn't work as well as I expected it to. Fade unmatched objects. This object should actually just build and not fade in and fade out. So let's move on to the next one because I have a couple of examples. Over here, I have 4 objects. I want to go to the next slide and I want the circle at the bottom to move up to the middle. Let's say, for example, my presentation has four main sections and I want to highlight each section as I go from section to section. So I'm going to, let's just remove this and say none. I want this to be a magic move. Let me just view my object list on the side over here. It's got a magic move already. Okay, now we're done. Okay, so I duplicate my slide. And on the second slide, I'm going to move this to the middle of the screen. You can see the guides that helped me to see that I was right in the middle of the screen. I'm going to make this bigger, and let's just push that up a little bit. Let's go back here and choose magic move. And you can see how this will look in real time. As I'm starting part 1, let's give it a title. Now let's see if we want to finesse this a little bit. I've prepped this a little bit more. Over here, I've got part 1, part 2, part 3. Let me just make sure that my magic move is removed over there. Right. So what I did was I took these objects, I duplicated them and made them slightly opaque. You don't have to pay me for this, this tip if you give presentations. I'm now going to take these and I'm going to move them so that they're behind those objects. Now I'm going to duplicate the slide and I'm going to take this bit of text or this shape, move it up here, resize it, and I'm also going to make the text size larger. Let's make it 200 points. Bit too big, 150. Okay, that'll do fine. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this guy. I'm going to go to animate, and I'm going to make this magic move. So now when I start my presentation, let's run it. I'm going to go, okay, let's talk about part 1, give it a click. And you can see down in the bottom left-hand corner, part 1 is grayed out. This is where we are. Now I'm going to go to give my presentation. I duplicate the slide for the next part. Okay, now we're going to go into part 2. So my presentation now has this kind of cinematic feel, which makes it more engaging. It lets people know where they are in the presentation. It lets me know where I am in the presentation. And it's just a nice little technique to make your stuff look a little bit more professional. We can also use Magic Move for text. And when you have Magic Move selected, if you see my animation portal over here, we can match by object, by word, or by character. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to duplicate the slide twice. Now, I looked up anagrams, and I looked up the anagram for asleep. So on the second slide, I'm going to say elapse. And on the third slide, I'm going to say please. And I'm going to make that Magic Move is on. And because I've duplicated, this is Magic Move, but I'm going to make it by character. By character and by character. So now if I run through this, let's play it. If you fall asleep, time will elapse. So please don't fall asleep during my presentation. And obviously you can do this by word, you can do this by character, or you can do it by object as well. So you can move things around and make your stories professional. Well, make them look good. So that's your transitions. Again, a fast run through the transitions. Let's move on to builds now. So here I've got some text builds, and I have, let's remove this, sorry. You can see I've been doing work on here. So when it comes to text builds, Keynote will animate it for you, and I want to show you the automated procedures it does. If I click on my text, I'll just use something very simple, but we've got move, I can preview. You can see the text moves in. I can make it fade in and fade out. Oh, sorry, that was an action. Let me go to build in. Let's add an effect. So we can dissolve the text in. I can make it appear, just bang, straight come in. I can have it come in from a blur. I can do drop, so it all comes in from the top. I can do cubes. So there's some beautiful cinematic effects that I can do. So let's just take it very simply, and I'll just take it to dissolve in. And oh, by the way, it remembers your last 3 recent ones. So if you're using the same effect, you don't have to go and find them at the bottom. They'll appear over here. So if I run this over here, you can see delivery currently is all at once. So if I click play and I click, all of my bullet points appear at once. If on the other hand, I select that and say, do it by bullet, now when I play, it will reveal each bullet point one at a time. Right? If on the other hand, I select by bullet group, it will take the bullet point and the sub bullet points and play them simultaneously. Okay. Then we've got by highlighted bullet. Now, if we run this, this is an effect that some people have to do quite a lot of work to do. They think they don't know it's available. It highlights the bullet point and it makes the previous bullet points 50% opaque, so you can keep people on track and keep yourself on track where you are inside the presentation. So that's some of your text builds. Very useful little tool. Now, another way of doing it, if the text builds don't do what you want it to do, what I've done over here is I've got a transition where I'm actually building 2 slides. And what I've done on the second slide is I've taken one of the words. So I took the word important, I copied it, made a text box, and pasted it in. And then I got rid of the bullet point and I changed the color. I changed the color to red. And you'll see that on the second slide over here. If I move this off, you'll see I've got a word here. Let's undo that. So what I've done is there are no transitions on the text. Let's just get rid of all of that. There's no transitions on the text. But what I've done on the second slide is I've made the text gray, and I've pasted the word on top of the original word. So now if I play this, there's my text. If I click now, The text goes out, so I've done a transition to a new slide where the text is different, but I've made it look the way I want it to look. So this is also quite a useful technique. Obviously, this can be extrapolated to all sorts of stuff. Right, object builds. Remember, builds are the appearance of what happens when an object appears on the screen. So I've got these and I want them to appear one at a time. So I'm going to select this first one, and I've already got an effect called anvil. So let's click preview. That comes in, anvil's heavy, it gives us some dust. Okay, that's fine. Let's take the second one, and that's also anvil because I've copied and pasted them. So if I play the slide, you'll see I click once, click twice, I have to wait for the dust to settle, click a third time, and these all appear one at a time. Now, when it comes to builds, I can choose what happens when they come in and when they leave. So I did a build in. I want to take this object and I want to build it out as well. I want it to disappear. So I've actually done this already. So my apologies, I did this as a prep. But what I've done is I've had a build effect called shimmer. I preview it. When it goes out, it'll look like that. This one, I want to change to shimmer as well. Where's my shimmer? I've made it quite long. They're 4 seconds, so I can change that. Let's just change this to, sorry, that was on build in, undo, build out, add an effect, shimmer, build out, add an effect, shimmer. So now I've got 6 things that happen. I've got 3 build-ins and I've got 3 build-outs. But now I'm a little confused because, you know, actually, if I run this, and let's just take the build-ins, so shimmer, that's 4 seconds. I should have made it quicker, but nevertheless, I can go back and adjust that. If I play this, I click, there'll be a 4-second build-in. That's coming second. Now, I actually want the first one to go out before the second one comes in. If you look down here, we've got build order. If I click on here, I get this floating palette. There's another place to get it from. If I go to view, I've also got my build order tools. So this gives me my objects, and you can see the effect and the image name. So if I click on that one, you can see it highlights it. I want this to shimmer before this one goes out. So I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to drag it up. Then that one comes in, and then I want it to go out before this one comes in and goes out. So now, just ignore those for the moment. If I run this, if I click play, first one comes in, then I click, and it goes out, and I click again, and it'll go out before the next one comes in, and so on. But now, what if I want this guy to come in while this one's going out? If I take the anvil coming in, you can see if I can drag it up and join it with this one. So now we've got image starts on click. Second image comes on click, but this one, I wanted to come with build 2, right? And I'm going to do exactly the same for these 2. So let's see what happens. With build 4. So I'm rushing through this. So let's just see quickly what it is. Click the first one, comes in. Click the second one, it'll shimmer out, and the other one comes down. So now I can adjust it. I can create a slight delay and so on. But this allows me to really craft the animation and how things work on my presentation. So that's builds. The other thing we can do, which I mentioned before, is actions. What happens to an object when it's on the screen? And what I'd like to do, this was about folder sharing. So I wanted to give the concept that the person who has this folder will share it with this person, the person who has this folder will share it with that person. So one of the things we can do is create an action. So I'm going to click on actions and add an effect, and I want this to move. And what it does is it moves it slightly, and it gives me this line that shows me where the move is. So I'm going to take this guy, and I'm going to move it over here, right? And if I preview that, you'll see that it moves across. Okay, great. Now I want to take the other object and move it to the left. So that's kind of easy enough to do. I just take this, add an effect, click move. Going the wrong way, not a problem. I just move this guy over to the left here. So let's play this and see what this looks like. Okay, it's happening one at a time. Well, that's pretty boring. So I want this to happen simultaneously. So I go to build order, and I'll take the left folder and the right folder, and I'll make the right folder go with build one. Okay, that's fine. So let's have a look and see what that looks like. Okay, that's better, but they go behind the cloud and that's not so fun. So let's see what I can do to finesse this. One of the things I can do is if I click the object and click the little red dot at the bottom, you can see if I move my cursor along the line, can you see this little yellow dot, this little white dot here? If I click and drag that up, I can create a path that it moves on. And if I click on this folder and click on there, I can do this. And now if I preview this and play it, it's starting to look a little bit more interesting. So using very, very simple tools, we can create some really nice animations. And when we do these, we can also create additional actions. So I can build action after action after action after action, and I can build an entire story through this. The last bit of animation that I want to show you is basically hyperlinks. And those of you who sat in the first keynote presentation will be aware of it. One of the things that we can do is we can take objects and we can link them to other things. So we can link them to other slides, we can link them to a web page, we can link them to an email address. So what I've done on each of these 3 slides is I've linked the blue to slide 24. Slide 24. Basically what I'm trying to do over here is if you click on this button, it will take you to the slide which has the color and it'll speak the word and it'll tell you what it is. So every red object is linked to the page with red. So the hyperlink for that one should be 25. If I click there, yep, slide 25. Click on this one, slide 25, and so on. So just to show you the process again, if I didn't have a hyperlink over here, removed it. If I wanted to click on green and made sure it went to the slide with the word green on, I know it's slide 26. I can select this. I can add link to a slide and I can say, go to slide 26. If I click the pop-up, they're all there anyway. Okay. So what does this look like in practice? If I click play, green. If I click on red, red. It takes me to the slide with red. If I click on blue, blue. If I click on green, green. If I click on red, if I click on green, green. If I click on blue, blue. It looks like I'm on the same slide, but I'm actually traversing 3 separate slides. Now, this is fun in an educational section, but what if you're giving a presentation and you want, your presentation is not going all that well, or there's an object that somebody who gave the presentation before you covered the topic and you don't want to deal with it. What if you had buttons at the bottom that took you to your chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you could just click on it and jump straight to that presentation or straight to that part of the slide. So hyperlinks can be really useful for navigating around your own presentation. And of course, if you export your presentation as a website, or if you put it on a standalone kiosk with a touch screen or an iPad, all the links will work perfectly and then people will be able to navigate the presentation at their own steam. So I'm 15 minutes over normal time. I'm 5 minutes over the Q&A time. So I'm going to stop there and ask everybody whether or not they have any questions for the presentation.
Okay, I have a question.
Margie.
Yes.
Your question from earlier in the week.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you for reminding me. It's not visible by default. And again, if you don't have this in your version of Keynote, all you have to do is just download the latest version. So if I say show object list, any graphic object and any text object, in fact, anything on the screen, watch what happens if I click on text. I get a little text object over here. And these are all in the correct order, right? Or at least they're all in the order that they were created. So what can you do with this? Firstly, these are all circles. I have no idea which one is which over here, other than when I click on it, it highlights the object on the screen. But I can double click these and rename them. So I can say this is right circle, this is mid-right, and so on, okay? So this shows me their object path from the one right at the back, right to the one right in the front. Now, if I was to animate these, let's just add a quick build in over here, add an effect. So let's just do a dissolve in, add an effect, dissolve in, add an effect, dissolve in, add an effect, dissolve in. Okay, so now if I was to run that and click play, I get the first one, I get the second, I get the third, I get the fourth. Okay, so far so good. Now I delete this guy, which is what you did, Margie, and I add a new shape. Okay, and I add an effect to it. Right, dissolve in, and now I try run this, and I get 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, that's not the way I wanted it. So if I've named these guys, it's just got that selected, it's got star, that's fine, that's good enough for now. And I go to my build order, you'll see I've got circle, which is highlighted, mid-right, right, and star. All I do is take star and drag it between 1 and 2, right? So that's the first, second, third. If I click play, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you name your objects, it'll be much easier to know what's what, especially if you put an image in, because it might come in as image underscore 1, 2, 3, and you won't know which one is which unless you're watching the screen and click it. Excuse me, but this is how you adjust the running order of the builds that you have inside your presentation. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, thank you. I was missing how to label it.
Right, yeah, double click on the text field on the object list on the left-hand side. Any text questions? In what different formats can you export Keynote presentation? So you can export your Keynote presentation as PowerPoint, you can export it as a PDF, you can export it as a series of images, and when you're doing those images, you can choose whether it builds an image per build or per slide. You can export it as a movie. You can rehearse your slideshow and narrate it and export it as a movie which contains the entire presentation with your narration. If you've got a little animation like I made the builds of the rotating folders, you can save those out as an animated GIF. So if you need to, if you want to put an animated GIF that will run on any device, you can do that there as well. I don't think I'm missing anything there. No, that's it. And if you need to preserve compatibility with Keynote 09, that's also possible over there. So thanks all, and we look forward to seeing you